So thank you all for coming this evening, and thank the people on YouTube to join us and so on. So tonight we have a small group with us here on Zoom, and that'll be good conversation between the three of us. Maybe some other people will join. In the meantime, we will begin with our opening prayers. We'll do a short refuge prayer and four immeasurable qualities to set our motivation, our intention for this discussion tonight. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent. I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent. I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonam la, Zhangzhu badu dagni kapsu chi, dagi jinsoki pe sonam gi, Drola penshir sangye jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gurdang dembar jorchi. Dug now dang dunal gigu dang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pede wadang mi drawar jorchi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang drawe dang namla ne par jorchi. Thank you very much. So, does anybody have any comments or questions? Something that you'd like to talk about that we haven't, talked about recently, or something that you want to talk about coming up, or any comments? Okay. Last week we talked about the six human realms, and did anybody have any questions about that? How do you feel about that? Thinking about your life as being a composite of these six human realms, that at any given time we're going to be some combination of the God realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realms. How did that land on you, Aliyah? How did that land on you?
I think it was a lot to take in, but it was interesting to see how everything was kind of like sectioned out and put together. And I think like the pictures really brought it home for me in terms of like where you are or where you're trying to get to be, or kind of like also the pairs of opposites, like in Ayurveda and holistic medicine, that also is a big theme. Like, even though you have like the hungry ghost realm, um, there's also something, that's helping you to enlightenment at the same time too. So I think being able to kind of see the different types of suffering and where you may be, and how to kind of get on back on the road to enlightenment or on the path of your Dharma. I think that was kind of nice and helpful to be put into context for me. I think those things kind of go in waves. Um, and I guess like the demigod realm, I think those I'm still trying to like understand and also kind of look at objectively in terms of my life and things and experiences that I've had. Um, and being mindful of these things also going forward, like these qualities and where they come up. Um,
Did you see it as a psychological profile?
yes, not only of myself, but also for other people too. Yeah. And kind of keeping this in the back of my mind too when I'm like interacting with people or even um, having like that, like mind chatter also, like what's really going on and identifying it and kind of putting it into words, like, why my actions are maybe the way that they are. Um, I think life is not easy and it's definitely a struggle. So I think like that, the action and result, being able to put those two things together and the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts and things that go into it as well. So yeah, I do agree that it is a psychological thing, like a moment to moment type of um, understanding and awareness. Um,
Do you remember the six realms?
um, it's the hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, animal realm, human realm, demigod realm, God realm. I think I
Those are the
missed.
six. Yeah. So, what is it about the jealous God realm that you find difficult?
Oh yeah. I think like in general, like the jealousy in general, I'm having to get better at just not comparing myself to anyone else and just kind of understanding and knowing like my path is set for me versus being like jealous, I guess, in that way. I'm not sure if I'm contextualizing it correctly. Um, so I think just jealousy as like an emotion, I think I'm trying to get better at just identifying and where it's coming from and why. Um,
Why do you think somebody is jealous?
Other people or in
Why,
general.
why, why do you think an individual person, some person, maybe it's you, somebody else that you know that has exhibited jealousy, why do we
Yeah.
get jealous?
I think it comes from and stems from like a lack of something within themselves that's being reflected in maybe the situation or scenario or the person. I think it's more of a reflective thing for someone to have those types of feelings. So I guess to your point, and helping my thinking along is like when I start having that feeling come up or bubble up, I have to think why, who am I comparing myself to, where is that originating from? Really, I guess like the why of it all, and maybe asking myself maybe 5 times, why is that, or what's going on, or why am I feeling that way? Yeah, until I can kind of talk myself off the ledge sometimes too.
Yeah, well, I think that's all true, and I think that that it's a poor state of well-being to
Hmm.
drive somebody to feel jealousy because they don't feel adequate to be able to do this, that, or the other thing, or this to have something, a relationship or whatever, and they become jealous of other people that do, have that. So one of the reflexes of that poor self-image is to overcompensate.
Oh,
So
right.
when they can, they try and overachieve. They put themselves. They try and gain power over other people or something like that, so that they can feel better about themselves. They need to feel something that's important for themselves, and And maybe it's a question of just not being ordinary. Some people just don't want to be an ordinary person, and why is that? Because of, some jealousy or something, so looking at it from a psychological point of view, I think is the right way to do it. And the more that you look at it and see it within ourselves, when was I jealous? What was I jealous about?
Hmm.
And taking a look at that and then thinking about other people in the same situation.
Agreed. Yeah. I think I have um, been able to maybe take a deep dive into that a little bit more too, especially with like friends or family or just random people, and
You mean discussing it with them or just thinking about them?
just thinking about it like in my own mind, because I think it's that awareness that really has helped me kind of like change my perception of the
Yeah.
situation. Yeah. Um, because it feels like the same lesson, I guess, comes up in some ways. Like the same situation may occur. So it's not a matter of like comparison, but rather maybe more contemplation of why I'm feeling or thinking that way, so that I can like perceive the situation in a different way if jealousy is that thing that's actually coming up. Because
Right.
I think too, we've each had our own lives and paths that, maybe somebody else would look at ours and be, jealous or feel a certain way about it. But it's all about really like perception of it.
Have you thought of jealousy as a conflict? It becomes a source of conflict that the individual who is exhibiting, jealous behavior is conflicted with themselves, conflicted with other beings, and so on. And that's the personification of the jealous gods, is that they're in conflict with the gods because they want to be a god, but they don't feel like they are a god,
Mm-hmm.
and they're jealous and are in conflict with other jealous gods because they want what those other gods have. So they feel that they have to, enter in conflict with them. They have to dominate them to be able to get from them what this individual wants. So it's a constant state of conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm reducing that a lot more. I think, figuring out where that was stemming from in myself. And I think maybe now I can recognize it a little bit better in other people also, and where that potentially may be stemming from, but still being able to like approach it if it's, maybe geared towards me or aimed towards me, just having that like kindness and compassion regarding, their thoughts and feelings and emotions about how they feel about like a situation or something material or an experience, or it could be anything sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, just being more objective about that, my awareness of that situation and that coming up. Yeah.
So yeah, so I appreciate this conversation we're having, and Kunga, I want to ask you to some question about it too. Have you comment on it? But I just want to make one more point, regarding what we're talking about with Leah right now, and that is, what is the antidote to jealousy? How do we overcome when we recognize jealousy within ourselves? We recognize that conflict within ourselves, or we see it in other people, and we're in a position to maybe help leverage them, to overcome their jealousy, their anger, or not the anger, but the jealousy, the envy. What is the antidote for that?
I think contentment, or something along the lines of being okay with like your situation and like the cards you were dealt, I think, in this lifetime too, as it relates to, I don't know, like money or marriage or kids or any career, things like that. Um, and understanding that there really isn't that comparison, that there doesn't need to be, because everyone's path is individualized. Um, and for me, I think that's more based on like, Ayurveda and like your Vedic chart. Um, think having a better understanding just on a personal level about that, just knowing that that's, my path is kind of set and made for me, and I have to kind of like live that path. So I do feel like I've reduced that feeling or like turmoil or suffering that maybe could be caused by having those like jealous thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
I think that there's a fearfulness in all of this, in all these different afflictions, these emotions. There's a base of fear with all of them, but with this poor sense of well-being that a jealous person is feeling, there is a fearfulness that kind of gets pushed back to the back of the mind, so to speak, and it just kind of sits there and festers. I'm not worthy. I can't
Mm.
accomplish these things. I can't go there. I can't do this, and so on. So the antidote, I think, is explained in terms of being able to engage in accomplishing. Taking small goals for yourself, obtainable goals, and working towards those obtainable goals, and then maybe moving on to others, gaining confidence. So there's a unimpededness. You can go wherever you want to go. You can do whatever you want to do. But a lot of times, that which you think you want to do, you don't, when you get it, you find, oh, this is what I wanted. This is what I thought it was going to be. So it's becoming circumspective of what our goals are and what's holding us back, and what it is that we need to do these things. And sometimes we have to take a chance. Sometimes we have to, put our fearfulness aside and say, I got to be a little bit bold here, and I got to, try something new, try something different, and work it out. Whatever wherever it leads us, and so on. So there's a fearfulness aspect to the antidote. There's an unimpeded aspect to it, and there's a strategy, of making goals for ourselves, obtainable goals. And if we fail, we know that we can just pull ourselves back and we move in the other direction, because usually there's a couple, at least two choices, and we choose one choice, and we may not be happy with that, and then by choosing the one choice that we're not happy with, that leaves us, well, maybe I should have taken the other choice, and now I go and choose that one and find, oh, that works really great. Or maybe there's a third choice or something like that. But there's a strategy involved, is my point.
Mhm. That makes sense. Thank you.
So, Kunga, what comments do you have about the six human lives, the six human realms?
Well, I think that can help you to experience or feel a lot more compassion for people in the world and people that seem to be suffering in those different realms. And we can rather than thinking that someone is um is acting badly, and feel like, they're just proud. They just think that the power is everything. They're just deluded, and thinking they're a bad person. We can think that maybe the conditions of their life are such that they're just not aware, of the position they're in. Then that the way they're acting, they think that's just the way that they're going to get happiness and avoid suffering. They're not really any bad people in the world. They're just people acting the causes and conditions, and these causes and conditions, can be explained in people living in these different realms. Where here we are in the human realm, we have a nice opportunity to practice the Dharma. We have an opportunity to see how things influence us in life and maybe make decisions rather than just being pushed around by our circumstances. And there's other people in the world who are maybe experiencing something that's more like a hell realm. And that hell realm may be caused by the environmental factors that they're living in. It might be psychological factors, that it creates such overwhelming forces and so much suffering that they really don't have a choice. They're just barely surviving. or people that are completely drawn around by their desires, their greed for accomplishment, their greed for financial security, whatever. And they just think that's how the world works. That's how they were brought up. That's what they see from their culture, and they're just kind of lost in that experience. They'll be always suffering all the way till the end of their life because they'll never be satisfied from any of those experiences, especially when they get to the time of their death and they have to lose them all. And it just gives you a lot more compassion, I think, for people in those different realms, rather than just thinking why are these people so bad? Why are these people so awful? These people need to be incarcerated or whatever kind of punishment you think they should get. Um, thank you.
How about yourself, and in regard to how it is that you got in this situation? How it is that you got in these six realms of being a human being, where sometimes you feel like a god, sometimes a jealous god, etc. Sometimes a hell being. You know, how did you get here? Do you think about that?
Hmm. Well, I think I get there based on how I respond to what's going on in my environment. Um, so,
Do you ever
things
put
are
it in
maybe
terms
I'm
of
on. Hmm?
Do you ever put it in terms of karma?
Yes, but I see myself as that co-creator of that karma also.
Well,
Maybe
who's the other
well,
creator? If there's a co-creator, who's that?
all the other beings.
So the other beings are forcing you to be in
No,
a particular.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that, we're all affecting each other. you know um you know my parents certainly had a role in the kind of life I ended up with. So whether or not there's really a separation between myself and my parents, I guess, we might say that spatially there is, or it's hard to say, but I think that certainly other beings and other things in the world are interacting. I don't think that I am the sole um creator of all that happens in the world. I think that I'm responding to the world, and the world is also, you know responding to how I act. Um,
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and that's what I really wanted to talk about tonight was, the causes of karma that have put us in these situations and so on. And to be able to look at that. And so that's what I wanted to kind of focus on tonight. And, the premise that, maybe people, uh, yourself or other people, and who are always finding blame, you know, for their parents, blame for their brothers and sisters, blame for their schools or their friends or lack of friends or whatever. They're always trying to find blame for why they are the way they are. These people, saying, "Oh, it's not me," you know. I'm willing to do anything. I'm great, but it's because my parents didn't teach me very well that I turn out this way. And these people can be 55 years old or something, and they're still blaming their parents. So my point is, at what point do we say, despite the fact that we didn't get everything that we thought we should have gotten as a child or as a teenager or as a student or something because of the inadequacy of the system of the schools or family structure or something, at what point do you take responsibility for where you are now 100%? Or do you never take 100% responsibility? And I think that's a fundamental question, because we have to take responsibility. The the causes of our karma, the karmas are the actions that we take. And the causes for those can be, as you point out, conditions of our environment, our families and so on, but it's the way in which we react to them that makes the difference. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean, I certainly agree that that the reaction you have to the experience is going to make a huge difference. Um,
The only thing you can change is yourself, you know, and if you recognize that somebody's worthy of blame, you know, well, all you got to do is change the way you react to that and the way that you engage with that particular person or set of conditions. When you finally say, I'm not going to be doing that, I'm not going to go into a smoke filled room anymore. I stopped smoking. I'm not going to go into a smoke filled room. I'm not going to go in there and tell people they got to stop smoking. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to engage with them. So I think, you know, that's the fundamental thing that, you know, I personally, you know, I came to some kind of understanding with the realization of taking responsibility for my own self, for my choices and so on, and the actions that I take and so on. And then the results that happen as a result of that. So our lives in the six human realms are the results of those actions that we've taken, either in this life or we can say in prior lives, but we don't even have to say prior lives because we can't be 100% sure about that. I mean, how many of us, I mean, do you remember past lives? Do you remember situations that you might have been in when you were living in 1850 in Eastern Europe or something like that? You know, but, or is it part of the, again, the human condition that we have empathy for people that lived in 1850 in Eastern Europe or wherever, you know, and we identify, you know, we can relate to that and say, oh, I understand how they might have made their decisions and so on. But at some point, you got to say, I'm not going to follow that anymore, or the only thing I can change, the only thing I can do is right now. Leah, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think to Kunga's point too, it's, you know, really about, you know, the conditions that were created for us to live our purpose and our dharma and be on the path of like learning the lessons that we have in this lifetime. But I do think that we do have past lives, whether or not we remember them or not, because those samskaras and impressions are there to make us kind of, I don't know, behave in the ways that we do now in the present. I don't think personally that doesn't come from anywhere. I think it does come from somewhere. And even with Ayurveda, that also, you know, the rebirth cycle is also part of it, even though I didn't grow up, you know, learning about that or believing that. But I think just as like a spiritual being, I think I started realizing that there was something to it and why we have, I guess, something called like a Kuvagaya, I think it is, Kuvaganya, like a weak spot that needs to be healed, basically. So, um, you know, whatever that is, like in terms of living our purpose in order to be able to kind of heal that wound, you know, and I think that it can come in a lot of different variations and directions. And yeah, I mean, I think we're given the conditions in this lifetime to kind of fulfill those things and kind of heal that wound. Um, yeah, so I mean, you're right in saying that, yeah, we can only change ourselves, but I think um, regarding like your parents and blaming your parents, I did do that for quite a long time. I don't think I had that maturity or realization for a while. And I think now I've gotten a lot better about it and able to look at my life and my parents' life just more objectively and why um, I have the parents that I do. And that could be the kavagunya. That could be the healing part where, you know, I basically have two vulnerable adults as parents. So like two vulnerable individuals um, that I feel like I have to take care of. Hence I became a nurse. And so I just feel like that's my purpose. Instead of being like, oh my God, I hate these people. They're so awful. Why'd they mess up my whole life? It's more of, okay, well, here's what you got. And this is the card the hand you were dealt. These are the cards that you've gotten. You're going to have to, sort it out. And really to like come to terms with that so that I don't have to keep like learning the same lesson over and over. It's about, I think, more of the peace of it, the peace in the process to reduce the suffering because, I think I'm also kind of stubborn in a lot of ways. So it's just kind of like trying to keep the peace instead of like resisting the reality. So it's taken a lot out of me to do that. But I think learning about past lives and about my birth chart has helped me through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gunga, you have any comment about this right now?
So I don't have an experience of past lives myself, but it seems like one of the pretty original teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha has taught a lot of things that I believe. So just based on the fact that he said many things he said I found very helpful. And then I can see the proof in my own life that I don't think the Buddha would tell me anything that would teach anything that he certainly taught that as if he himself experienced his past lives. So I just take that on faith, um, that exists. Just fact that why would the Buddha teach me something that's not true, that wouldn't be helpful.
Okay. Well, this whole topic, of karma and so on, karma, cause and result, effect, is got a lot of elements to it. So the way, I think the best way to dive in is know that we're going to go in circles with this. We're going to go around and we're going to kind of look at certain things and then move on to other things and then kind of come back around and refine, the things that we dig up, over time. So in this, 2-hour meeting that we're going to have tonight, we're going to lightly touch on a few things, but it requires a lot more. This is one of the deepest issues that we have to deal with in terms of Dharma. So we have to, define a few things. I think is important. So, karma. What is karma? And so we talk about that there's a cause for karma. There's karma, which is the action. That's what it means. It's the translation in from Sanskrit is an action that we take. That's the karma, and then the result is what happens as a result of that. What the effect of that choosing that action is, and so on. So, what makes a karma? What makes an action that can be considered to be something that is going to be a cause as a result? In other words, what we do now has a result, but that result then becomes an action for another karma. So it's a continuing spiral. It's a continuing, the wheel going around. What we do now is going to determine what is going to come up tomorrow, so to speak. So it's interesting to look at what are the 4 complete elements of karma. So you might want to write this down. It's also in the outline book. It comes from the JEWEL Ornament of Liberation, so you can refer back to this. But this is the onus for a contemplation. In other words, trying to intellectualize this in our conversation right now is going to uncover some things. But to get to the bottom of it, to get to the essence of it, we've got to spend time processing what we learn in contemplation, which then gives way to a meditation. The meditation comes out of a contemplation that has been exhausted. That's where the no thought is. You hear about meditation being no thought. It comes from the exhaustion the contemplation, from the practice. So the practice is a key element. What we're learning now are the academics. And we ponder the academics until we have personal experience with it. That's the practice. And then we mesh those two things together, the experience together with the academics in our contemplation, and then we have the meditation, where we rise above that process and we become free of it. Remember, this is the jewel ornament of liberation. So we're learning the process of liberating ourselves from all this mental activity and physical activity that we go through that is blocking up our spirituality, which is that liberation. Unless you have a different definition for spirituality. But my definition for it is that it is the connection of all things that is, in this phenomenal nature that is emptiness. That we create the appearances, or we analyze the appearances, and we create the karma. We create what we think this is, and so on. So it's all our projection. It's all our manifestation of all this. We are responsible for our life. Your life is different than my life, and everybody's got their own different way of looking at things. We can agree on a lot of things, but that's the substantive stuff. But the background stuff is relative to our prior experiences and the way we relate to it. And that's what we're trying to get to by looking at karma. So the four complete elements of karma. Number one, there has to be a motivation to do something. You have to have this cause to want to do something. Then you have to have an object of what that thing is, an object of how you're going to do it, and an object of what it is that you want to have as a result. So there has to be an object of the action. So there's a motivation for the action. There's an object for the action. If you have a motivation to do something, but you don't have a way to do it, you don't know how to do it, it's just going to stay there in that motivation, and be a frustration or something like that. But if you have if an example would be, wow, I would like to steal something. I think there's a thrill in stealing something. But, I don't go anywhere that I can steal something. I don't go into the drugstore, and I don't have the ability to do that. I like to steal a car, but I don't have the ability to go into a dealership and steal somebody's car or something like that. So there's not a real object. It's not possible for you without the object. So the motivation stays there, but there's no object. There needs to be an object to complete the motivation. Then the third part is there has to be the action that you actually do it. So it's not just a premeditation of wanting to steal the car, of wanting to, do something that's going to create a karma, that's going to create it. There's no object, but there is an object, and I'm going to do it. I know what I need to do to get it done. So there needs to be the action to complete the motivation and have the object of the motivation. So the fourth thing is that there is a completion, which is a satisfaction. To have a karma, to have a karmic result, there has to be a satisfaction that you did what you did. I stole the car, and I'm really happy I did it. Then, now you have the motivation, you have the object, you did the deed, and now you have the satisfaction of having done it. If you don't have the satisfaction, if you go steal the car and you say, oh, wow, I did this, but you know what? I'm not happy I did this. I feel guilty. I feel ashamed of myself. I took advantage of somebody. Maybe I stole somebody's car from their front driveway or something like that. And how are they going to get to work in the morning? And like that, I feel bad about that. So that's a mitigating circumstance of the karma. So you may have had the motivation, you had the object, you did the deed, but now you're not happy with the deed. So that mitigates the power of the karma. So we're going to talk about that part. But those four things have to be present for karma to manifest. Does that make sense? Anybody got any question about that, concern? All right. This is part of the academic. So learning this, even if you don't have a concept of what this means, it'll fall into place as we move along. So we've talked about that there are 10 non-virtuous karmas, and that there are 10 virtuous karmas. Do you remember those? There's 3 of the mind. There's 3 of there's 3 of the mind, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the body. These are the 10 non-virtuous karmas or virtues, the way it's expressed. The 10 non-virtues that makes up is a composite part of a karma. So the 3 of the mind is killing, is stealing, and is sexual misconduct. Excuse me, I misspoke. These are 3 of the body. These are 3 of the body. Killing a body, stealing a physical body, an object, something like that, and sexual misconduct of taking advantage of a body. So those are the 3 non-virtues of the body. The 4 non-virtues of the speech are lying, telling lies to yourself, telling lies to other people. Divisive speech is driving a wedge between yourself and other people in a group, dividing people. Divisive speech, saying nasty things, saying bad things about situations and so on that drive people apart. And the next one is harsh words. Harsh words would be like speaking loudly and yelling at each other and swearing, using swear words, words that are very offensive, to people and so on. Harsh speech is a non-virtue of the speech. And then the last one is idle talk. Idle talk is gossip. So, engaging in something that you've heard from somebody else, but you don't know it for sure, but yet you go and you continue the conversation. You continue saying these things about somebody. Oh, so-and-so did this, and you never saw it. You didn't hear it from that person, but you continue that story telling other people about this person that did these things and just gossiping. So that's called idle talk. So those are the 4 of the speech. And then the 3 of the mind are covetedness. Covetedness means that you covet something, that you have an envy or you want something, you want that car, you want that spouse, you fall in love with your best friend's, lover or something like that. And you're coveting that. You want that all the time. Or you want that job that somebody has. And you want the job that your boss has. You want to be able to see if you can get your boss fired so you can get their job. You're coveting that. So covetedness is that mindful wanting to have something like that. Then the next one is harmful thought. Harmful thought means you did something to me, and I wish that something happens to you that's worse than what you did to me. Having harmful thought. You went and did this, terrible thing, this terrible deed, stealing or lying or cheating or killing or something, and boy, are we going to kill you. Taking revenge, on somebody else's misdeed and so on. So having harmful thought for people rather than, trying to help them work out their difficulties. So harmful thought is of the mind. And that stays with us, mean-spiritedness. And the last one, the 10th of the non-virtues, is wrong views. And wrong views means not to see things in a pure way, a wholesome way. Maybe the first of the wrong views is not to recognize karma itself. To say that, I can go and do anything, and there will be no how do you say it? Repercussions or what is it? Reciprocity? I can't think of the word.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How do you say it?
Is it repercussions?
Repercussions would be a word for it. Yes, reciprocity.
Oh, reciprocity.
That's the word I'm looking for. The law of the golden rule. That's a reciprocity, isn't it? What you do is going to come back on you. You do good deeds are going to happen. You do bad deeds are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. There's a natural law of reciprocity. And a lot of people don't believe in that. It's of the mind, it's of the brain, but yet, in your own life, have you seen that action of reciprocity happen? When you did something bad and, you're constantly looking over your shoulder thinking that you're going to get called out on it. Somebody's going to, the police are going to come or your parents are going to come. Something's going to happen. So the first of the wrong views is that karma does not exist, that there is no law of reciprocity, that you can get away with impunity of doing anything that you want. The second wrong view is that there is no truth, that that you can do anything and it's all okay. There's the notion of nihilism. You can do anything and nobody's going to call you on it. There's nothing that you have to worry about. There's no truth. You make your own truth. And there's alternative truths or whatever, But but is truth a relative thing? Or is truth an absolute thing? And in what circumstances are the differences? But to say that there's no truth at all and you can create your own truth or something is a wrong view. And then another one is the three jewels. In Buddhism, we call it the three jewels. That there is the mind, there is the speech, and there is the body. The body is the physical aspect of our being, in nature and so on. And this phenomenal nature, we see all this, we see it as form and so on. So there is that. It's like a fact. It's a truth. We have this body. It may be a temporary body, but for this period of time, I have this body. So in this way, it's a temporary truth. I have a brain, and the brain thinks of things, has thoughts, and we carry out those thoughts through our speech or through our body, through our activities, through the things that we do with our hands, the things that we say, the things that we write, so on. So the speech is indicative of the brain, of those thoughts and so on. So that's a fact. That's the way it works. We have to have a thought before we can do an action. So that's one of the three jewels. The body is a jewel. The brain, the speech is a jewel, which represents all that activity. And the last one is the mind, that the mind is the heart mind. When we talk about mind, in this case, we're talking about the heart mind. We could say that this mind is the intellectual mind, the brain, and there are thoughts there and so on. But when the body dies, the brain dies, and all those thoughts go away, all those memories go away. But the heart thoughts, this is something that we call love. This is something that we call compassion. This is something that we call spirituality. Some people ignore that. Some people say it doesn't exist. It's something that we create for ourselves. But, for those of us who are spiritual, who have the view that we are part of something that maybe we don't completely understand, but yet we're part of this thing, and it has a physical aspect, it has an intellectual aspect, and it has a spiritual aspect to it. So we call these the three jewels. So in wrong view, people would ignore that or say that doesn't exist. So those are the 10 non-virtues. And that last one there was the non-virtue of the mind. Does that make sense? Anybody want to comment on that? So, yeah, I'm sorry.
Going back to what you said before about the complete elements of karma, I think the way they tie together for me is that, if you have one of these virtues, so when you look at the non-virtues, like taking life, so if you think, oh, that person cut me off in traffic, I'm so angry at them, I want to kill them. If you have that thought, that's bad. You shouldn't have thoughts like that. But if that's all you do is have that thought and you don't do anything further with it, then the karma results from that are going to be less. If you keep having that thoughts over and over, then, probably you're going to build yourself up to do something you regret. But if you recognize that thought was, something that you shouldn't have, and you should want to work with that, work against that, then the results, are later, maybe you'll have fewer thoughts like that.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So that's how I think the virtues, the non-virtues, like we could think of them, maybe in the beginning, we have those thoughts about these different virtues, but as long as we don't act on those thoughts and we realize that they're part of the non-virtues and we should be working in the opposite direction, then we're moving in the right way. It's not like that we're not going to have these thoughts,
So there's still a motivation. There's a motivation, and there's an object of the motivation, right?
Right.
But you haven't taken the action. So therefore, there's not going to be a completion.
Right. There'll still be some
and maybe you can say, go ahead.
There'll be some type of effect, but the effect is going to be less significant. You're less suffering for you in the end. The fewer of the parts that you actually complete the fullness, if it's a non-virtuous thing. If it's a virtuous thing, the more you complete them to full effect, the better it's going to be in the future, the better results you'll see later on down the line.
Well, you can habituate a change in your actions. So say you have the motivation and you have the object of the motivation, but the action you take is not to get angry, is not to kill that person, is not to steal that thing. You're making a conscious effort to not do that. And then the result you get is now a virtuous result. You had a negative cause, that motivation, and you had an object, but you've turned it around by doing a virtuous thing and not doing the negative thing. So your outcome now becomes a positive outcome. Likewise, you could do it the other way. You could say, oh, I've got a motivation to want to take a lover, you know, and then you take a lover, and the object is the lover and everything, but then you love that person and everything, but then at some point you start beating up your lover. You start getting angry with them. First you were loving them. You wanted to show them all that love and all that physicality and everything. Now you just want to beat them up. But so whatever your initial motivation was, love, now has been turned around, and now the outcome becomes something that is reprehensible and you can get locked up for. You can get into a lot of trouble for. So it can work in both ways. So it's changing the motivation, for the outcome that we want. And we're developing habitual tendencies in that process. Are our habitual tendencies to do good deeds, regardless of what the motivation is, and then using our morality, whatever, to be able to change that so that we always have a positive, virtuous outcome. So, just to complete the thought of the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues, that for each of those 10 non-virtues that I just rattled off, now there becomes a virtue of that circumstance. So like, instead of killing, that we're not going to kill, we're going to protect the lives of others, whatever it is, whether it's another human being, whether it's animals, whether it's furniture, you're not going to burn down somebody's house or something like that. You're going to protect the lives of others. I mean, specifically it talks about killing. So we want to be respectful of people's lives and so on like that. So we're going to protect people rather than kill them. And then the second one, instead of stealing, we're going to practice great generosity. We may feel like, oh, I need to go to the market and I need to steal a quart of milk, but we don't have much to be able to share. I'm going to share whatever I have. I'm going to resist. I'm going to avoid. I'm not going to go and steal, but I'm going to, whatever I can buy, whatever I can work for, whatever I can get, I'm going to share part of that with other people. I'm going to I'm going to cultivate generosity. So that feeling of wanting to steal something doesn't arise. It arises as wanting to help other people through generosity. And maybe it doesn't have to be generosity of a physical thing. It could be generosity of wisdom, generosity of love. So, and there's people that steal love. There's people that take advantage of relationships. It doesn't have to fit into, these complete compartments, physical, intellectual compartments or something. They can be spiritual compartments too. This is where we get into the contemplation stage. We start thinking about these. We start taking these ideas apart and putting them back together and say, well, this can fit in these different situations and so on. This is how we broaden our horizons and not just, silo thinking. It's very vertical and so on. We make it very horizontal and very broad. We see how these concepts work with other things of being a human being and so on. So the third thing was sexual misconduct. So instead of, sexually engaging with people that don't want that, that we are maintaining moral ethics, that we recognize that there are certain, not barriers, but certain rules that we should not do. We should not take advantage of someone. And sometimes the sexual taking advantage of people leaves scars that are very, very, very deep and very, very hard for those people to get rid of and so on, to overcome themselves. So it's a great heinous crime to do those things. So we have to establish and maintain moral ethics in order to overcome that sexual misconduct. So then, so those were of the body. Those were 3 of the body. So now the 4 of the speech are that first was the lying. So obviously the virtue that overcomes lying is always speaking the truth as best as we know it. And if we know it as conditional, well, the way I look at it this way based on this situation, here's the truth that I see. Or if you don't have an opinion, if you don't know at all, say, I don't know. Rather than trying to create some kind of a story, some kind of a narrative that gives you some sense of wisdom or self-worth or in the eyes of somebody else that you know something that they don't, something like that. So instead of lying, that you always tell the truth. Even if you don't know what it is, you say, I don't know. That's telling the truth in the face of ignorance. The next one was number 5, was divisive speech that divides people. Instead of dividing, that we find ways to harmonize. If you're in a meeting and say there's 20 people in the meeting and it's a heated meeting, that people are going back and forth, with all these different ideas and choices and everything, try and find a common ground. Try and establish, a harmony at some level and then start building up on that instead of just piling on this side or that side and creating more of a division between the people. Find the things that you can agree on. Find the harmony of it, how we can work together and so on, and work on that. So that is a virtue to overcome divisive speech. Then the next one is harsh words, was the non-virtue of harsh words, speaking loudly, shouting at people, using swear words, insulting them and so on. Instead of doing that, you're speaking peacefully and politely. That you're keeping your voice down, you're keeping yourself under control, and taking a deep breath, whatever it takes for you to be able to manage that and so on. And sometimes, cultivating that skill is very difficult. It's much easier to get emotional, and it feels good to get emotional. Man, I'll fight for this, and you keep on going. But to be able to be rational, to be able to be polite and kind to other people is the virtue. These things may seem to be, we can take these things for granted very easily, and we lose sight. And there are certain, what do you call them, trip levers or something like that can set us off. Getting caught in traffic and getting mad at the guy that cuts you off and so on like that. You don't expect doing it, but when you do react that way, you feel bad. You get all anxious inside and so on. You say, I wish I didn't do that. So knowing this, the academics of this is really important. It's not something that we should allow ourselves to take for granted. So the next one is idle talk, gossip. So instead of doing idle talk, instead of gossiping, that we speak meaningfully, that we mean what we say, that we have experience with what it is that we say. And if we're talking about somebody else behind their back or something like that, we need to invite them into the conversation, or we need to just not go down that path. Or if you find yourself that you've slipped and you carried on a gossip that you realize is wrong, what you should do is immediately, as quick as you can, call that person up. Go see that person. Say, you know what? I just said this about you. I think I might be sorry for this, but can you clarify if this is true or not? You know, even after you said it, or preferably before you go and say something like that. So speaking meaningfully, you know, to get to the root of the truth of what it is, rather than carrying on some kind of a story, a lie, some kind of idle talk, some kind of gossip. That you go to the source and you seek that out. So speaking meaningfully, that's called. So those are the four virtues of the speech. Then the three virtues of the mind are, number one was covetedness, was the non-virtue. And then in speaking, instead of thinking that you want what somebody else has, coveting that you practice unattachment. I don't need that. I don't want that. You know, it'd be nice to have it, but, you know, I'll go to work and I'll get it in my own way, you know, do my own job. I'm not going to think of it as being able to steal it from somebody else, to rob somebody else of their partner or something. And because that just sits in the back of the head and just kind of rots away, you know, it festers, you know, oh, I want that, you know, being in love with somebody that you can't have or something like that is a very, very nasty thing. So to practice unattachment is the antidote for that, is the virtue to be able to overcome that covetedness. Number 9 was harmful thought, wishing ill of somebody who did, you know, something that was bad and harmed you or somebody else. Instead, practicing kindness. You know, saying, I know, you know, you didn't do the right thing. And instead of my saying, oh, I wish, you know, more harm comes to you than you did to me or to somebody else, I find ways to be able to help them to be able to recognize what it is that they did, what the suffering they caused, so that they can self-correct themselves and so on. So practicing loving kindness. Loving kindness is another way of saying wisdom. So wisdom is another way of saying education, by helping somebody to recognize what it is that they have done, instead of just jumping down their throats and wishing more ill of them than they created themselves. And then the 10th one is wrong views. And so instead of having wrong views, that we engage in the perfect meaning. So we look at, you know, in this case, we look at what the truth is. We look at what are the three jewels, you know, the body, speech, and mind, you know, the way in which our physical body is, the way our intellectual mind is, and the way our heart mind is. And then we look at the laws of reciprocity or repercussions, that we analyze that, we take a look at that and so on. We're engaging in the perfect meaning of what it is to be a virtuous human being, a person who is practicing wholesomeness. And to recognize, you know, unwholesomeness, you know, maybe when we were teenagers, when we were kids, maybe later on in life, you know, but when we were teenagers, when we were young kids, you know, to do unwholesome things was a lot of fun. We were taking advantage of people. We were doing things to people, and so doing pranks on them, and the stealing, petty stuff that kids do, that people do, and everything, and realizing that it's not a good way of life. Realizing that to be wholesome maybe isn't as much fun, but it liberates you from the suffering of having to look over your shoulder all the time, that when is this repercussion going to come? When is this police going to come? When am I going to have to pay for those nasty things that I've done, whatever they were? So engaging in the perfect meaning is to be a perfect human being, to be a complete human being, a wholesome human being. So this helps us to define, you know, the dualistic behavior that we have in motivation an object of an action. Now we got a rule system to help us to be able to guide us what is virtue and what is non-virtue. Any comments or questions? Oh, pardon me. Comments or questions? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, but it's not what you see out there in the world, though,
No,
right?
but we can't control that. We can only control ourselves.
But it's something just to, who
But
would
that
think
doesn't.
that
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it's just surprising. I don't think it's always been like this, but it seems like currently that, when we watch the news, those non-virtues are just all over the news, and it's like those are celebrated, and it just makes you feel like where did we get lost as a culture
We're in a
that we're
trough.
celebrating?
We're in a trough. We're in a cultural trough right now. I mean, we would say that. The other side says that the people, the spiritualists, they're in a trough. They think we're crazy.
Yeah, I don't, they, I think that we all agree on what makes the non-virtues, but we all have these perspectives so that we see what is non-virtuous to one side is just explained away by the other side. So people are so caught up in their own perspectives they don't see a bigger picture. Just see
No,
this little glimpse, and then and then we associate with people that just build on our little glimpse, and then we all have this delusional view of what's going on in the world. It's bad enough that we're delusional, that we think of ourselves as separate and permanent and unconnected, but now we have this delusional view that we can see non-virtuous active and say, oh no, that's virtuous, you're just mistaken, you don't really see what's going on, when you're like, it's right there in front of my face, but the person's like, no, 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 that's not really what's happening.
I know. But is that an explanation or an excuse for not practicing the virtues?
Well, for for me, I think that seeing the suffering that's being going on by those non-virtuous actions being practiced is gives me encouragement to practice. Um, to practice harder. I think it's, I can see that there's a lot of suffering being created from those types of way of interacting in the world.
As part of our work, as being a spiritual being, is to radiate that, to let that shine forth, to help other beings. Not that we got to go and shake them and convince them that they got to believe the way we do, but we become a model of what it is to be a virtuous person. And people can recognize that. I think people do recognize that, you know. So I know lots of people who 2 or 3 years ago I couldn't have conversations with, that now I'm having conversations. And it's not because I've lightened up, it's because they've lightened up. They're seeing the results of their misconceptions, their wrong views, and they're seeing it come home to roost now. And now they're looking for more conversation. They miss the relationships that we used to have. Have you seen that at all?
I think that people respond to you not responding to them in anger. I think that if you can listen and be patient with people, even though you maybe feel like they're completely going down the wrong road, if you just listen to them and without judging them and telling them they're wrong, that yeah, they appreciate that, and then they want to know why you're acting that way, and they want to understand where that viewpoint comes from.
The conversations I have, I insist on the conversation not get to be harmful speech or how do we say, harsh words or yelling and getting red in the face and cussing, and I insist on that. If somebody goes back to that kind of behavior, I leave. I walk away. You know, it's got to be a civil conversation. So we can talk. You can talk about your views and this other view and everything. As long as it's civil, you know, okay. Alea, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess to your guys' point too, like, I guess civil or not, I try now not to walk away because, like, I think I have a lot more, I don't know, compassion and understanding, like maybe a little bit more than, like, I almost, it kind of goes in, like, I don't know, not to be sarcastic, but I almost feel like sorry for them, you know, like, because this is kind of like they're suffering, right?
Right.
And you're just, oh wow, like you really just can't see past your own nose, or you can't see the other side, or maybe it's even hard for them to understand and see where you're coming from too. So I've had relationships become more distant with good friends that I've had because maybe my way of viewing the situation or their situation that may be a problem or difficult is not the way that they see the situation. So I think it's been kind of interesting to see that kind of come to fruition. And I think it does get a little lonely sometimes, but I think once you just kind of, because it's like you're kind of mourning a loss. You're like, oh, well, maybe I rubbed them the wrong way, but it's really their perception of what I was maybe saying. And you think maybe you're trying to not like enlighten them, but like just shed some light on their situation to be like, hey, like just because you think it should go a certain way, it may, that situation may not. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking back to like one specific friend that I have that was the situation. We're still friends now, and she's still very helpful, and I can still reach out to her. Um, but we've been friends for like over a decade, so it's just kind of interesting to see kind of where the relationship has landed now. But I've kind of slowly just kind of reduced my expectations about the relationship and don't expect it to be like this just happy-go-lucky, we'll just pick up where we left off kind of thing. It's like, okay. And again, I think she was kind of like, had a lot of life experiences that she thought were more black and white or should be that way, versus the reality is life is quite gray. And I think she kind of came to that realization too. So it's almost like you almost wait patiently for people to come around too, and you just lead them, you know, guide them, and just kind of leave it be. And then I think that's kind of been, that was a learning lesson for me. Whether it was for her, I don't know yet. But I mean, we're still friends, but we're not as close, and that's okay with me. So, as you guys were talking, that was something that kind of like came to my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing for me.
Yeah.
So, how do we bring those 10 virtues to bear on the 10 non virtues? So, we need some power to be able to do that. We need some strength. We need some guidance to help us to do that. And that becomes, the, the, the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. The four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma are the power that generates the virtue to be able to deal with the non-virtue. We see precious human life. We see it in ourselves, but we also see the potential in other beings. We see impermanence. We see that the whole gamut of this whole conversation is all temporary. You know, if maybe in 10 years from now, maybe 5 years, maybe it'll be 20 years, we don't know. But things go in cycles, things undulate, and this whole this dualistic behavior is going to settle out at some point and become more even. It was that way before. You know, there were ripples and so on like that, but we're in a trough right now. You know, things are very polarized. But it's happened before. It's going to smooth out, and it's bound to happen again, you know, in 100, 200, 500 years from now. So being able to recognize the impermanence. The next thing is the suffering of samsara. This is the nature of samsara. The dualistic nature. Dualism is a part of the human condition. And to be able to have to roll with it, to be able to go with it, and not try and harness it, that is not going to be fruitful. Not try and harness it, without wisdom, without understanding, without compassion, to know how to do it, to have a system to rely on that has been shown to you, over the test of time, and that you can adapt to your situation today. So knowing the suffering of samsara, knowing the faults of samsara. So the faults of samsara, another way of looking at that, are the 6 human realms, that we have all these elements within us. If somebody hits the right or the wrong nerve or cord, all of a sudden we become a raving demon. All of a sudden we become a hungry ghost. All of a sudden we become an animal, because we were vulnerable and we let them in, or we didn't have the proper protection for ourselves. But by using the right protection, by recognizing the faults of samsara, who we are as human beings, that that's the step to be able to guard against corruption. And then the last one is the karma, the cause, the cause of karma, the action of karma, and the result of karma. So understanding these 4 things, these 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, are the power behind the transformation of the non-virtue to virtue. So again, this is a thing of taking the teaching, studying the teaching, practicing the teaching, even if we don't understand it completely, but we practice it. Let me try this instead of getting mad. Let me try this. And then see what the result is and say, oh, that worked better than I thought it would. And then we find ways to, incorporate that into our behavior and so on. So, and then we contemplate, well, what made the difference? How did that happen? How was it I was able to maintain my peace of mind, to be able to not get myself upset and knocked out of balance and have a negative conversation with somebody? And then we get through that, we look at all the permutations of how that might work, and then we just rest. We say, oh, boy, did I do a good job. Wow, I really got this figured out. Wow, I feel great. And you just kind of go into this kind of peacefulness, this state of nirvana, the state of liberation. And there, at least temporarily, is this meditative nirvana, this no thought. And that's what led me to it, was this process that led me to it. If I would have reacted the way I used to react, with temper and all that, I wouldn't have had that peace of mind. Now I've had that peace of mind. I say, this is worth, studying for. This is worth practicing for. This is worth, being in groups to talk about. If we try to do this in a vacuum, there's no support. It's very hard to maintain the energy and so on. But when you can get into a group like this, it becomes much easier to do. And we need to seek that out. And whether we're a leader in the group or we're a participant in the group, it doesn't matter. Sometimes the leader is just a participant, and sometimes the participant becomes the leader, brings up a new idea that everybody, starts talking about and so on. So it's just putting yourself on that path. Does that make sense? Do you see that happening? Gunga, in your situation, because you have group and everything, do you see this process in your groups? People coming in, very divisive and the way they think and so on, but being smoothed out over a period of time.
Oh yeah, very much so. They write about that in the journal all the time, how, and before I came into the class, I would have acted this way to this person, but now, I just took time, I thought about it, I walked away, or maybe I could see that they were suffering when they did that, so I didn't blame them for acting that way. Um, yeah, people talk about that all the time. I think it's very evident as you go through the practice that you start to apply these antidotes to your life, and you make decisions, and instead of just being pushed around by causes and conditions, you're taking the time to say, oh, I just had this thought. Now, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to act on it or not act on it? What kind of thought it is? I mean, there are so many people in the world they just think if they have a thought, they have to act on it. They have no idea that there's any place to take a break there, a pause, and consider what the next step should be. They just are living completely on reaction. Yeah.
So, do you see the sense of responsibility here? You know, that we're responsible for our own virtue. We're responsible for smoothing things out, for looking at things in this way. And I mean, do you
Yeah.
think does it happen? Does it happen spontaneously, or does it happen because you work for it?
No, I think you have to practice, definitely. Yeah, it doesn't just happen. I think that it happens quicker for some people just based on what the situation they've come into. And some people it takes longer because the situation. But I think that goes back to this idea that you've got some fruits from previous karmic actions, for coming to fruition, and you know
Mhm.
we've all done something. We've all had some experiences that are pretty positive in the past to enable us to be here now, to be talking about the Dharma, and to be understanding and appreciating it. If we didn't have those past good seeds, we wouldn't be here, watering them.
Yeah. So we're at the end of our meeting, but I want to give Elia, the opportunity to speak. I mean, do you um, recognize this sense of responsibility? Does this conversation we've had tonight, does this kind of, underscore, this responsibility that we have to engage in this way?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think with all of the different like jobs and people that I interact with, I guess like in the yoga studio with the nursing students, I have a meeting for work tomorrow where we're all in person and we see each other quarterly. The patients in the hospital, even my parents. Like, I definitely think that I've been put in this position to have the things that I have from like a previous life, to have these skill sets and impressions and, my own shortcomings. Cause even looking at these virtues, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm guilty of some of these things as well. And I think to Kunga's point too, it's like, do you put, even though you have that thought, like what action do you put towards it, or how much energy almost, you put into that thing to make it go, to like make it come to fruition or not. So I think it's really important to kind of recognize that. And in terms of, I guess, processing all the things that, all the roles I've been put into and the responsibility that that brings along with it too. So I definitely feel privileged, but also it kind of feels heavy sometimes too. So I just always pray to the universe, like, oh my God, let me just get through this clinical. Let me just get through my shift at the hospital. Let me just get through my deliverables for work, And sometimes that's, I don't know, like enough, but it's like simplified at least to the point that I'm able to not make it up in my mind that it's so hard or I can't get over it or if it's a hurdle. Like, I don't overthink it as much. It's just like the only way out is through. And I just keep trying to do that the best way that I can. So, yeah.
Having a system like this that we're talking about, a structure
Yeah.
like this, does this help?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I think it's like, even though you have like these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, this kind of breaks it down into like the mind, body, speech um, sections. And that's really helpful. Not only to see these things in yourself, but also to see them in other people and where their weak spots may be, or where yours may be, and where you can develop also. Um, so I feel very grateful to be at this stage of life, to have some experience under my belt, to be like, oh, okay, like I can understand and discern these concepts and be able to kind of put them into play. So yeah,
Okay.
to understand my role in all of this too.
Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you both very much. I think it was a very good conversation tonight. Thank you. So we'll do our dedication. So we'll do the dedication by Lord Jigten Sumgon, page 36 and 37. So if you've got your book or if you've memorized this, this is a great prayer to memorize. But it's very comprehensive and yet concise. So we'll recite this together, and you can turn your mics on or off, but try not to feed back with each other. The dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of the Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you, Congo. Thank you, Alea.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good night.
See you
Good night.
next week.
All right. See you
Thank you. Bye bye.